Thank you very much. I'd like to present Katie Green. She is the Communications and Access Manager for the Archaeology Data Service, ADS, in Great Britain. Her main role is to develop and promote the ADS across the archaeological community. This includes undertaking overall responsibility for ADS user services and outreach activities. Katie has a wide range of archaeological experience, from research to supervising and managing archaeological excavations. And we're very happy to have you here today, Katie. So please.
Thank you. And I've just realised you must have got that from the website, which must be out of date. I shall have to go hunt that down. I'm now actually the Collections Development Manager for the ADS. So I tend to work less so now with our users and more with our depositors. But I've been with the ADS for about 9 years now, and I was the Communications and Access Manager. So I've seen things from both angles. I'll have to hunt down where that's incorrect. So I'm going to be talking to everyone today about the ADS and giving a very brief overview of the current digital archiving landscape in the UK. And then towards the end of my presentation, I've been asked to introduce you to a recent project carried out in the UK called Think Archive, Work Digital, and some of the resources that it has created as part of that project. So for those of you who are not already familiar with us, the ADS is an accredited digital repository for archaeological and historic environment data. We were founded in 1996, which our director likes to point out means we are 2 years older than Google. We are hosted by the University of York in that lovely building there of King's Manor. And it's important to point out now, really, that we're not a national body. So we don't have any way in which we can mandate digital archiving. And we do not currently receive any core funding from the government, for example. So we have a charging policy that is based on a one-off charge to the data depositor on deposition of a data set with us. And that policy was developed because it's one that's quite familiar to archaeologists in the UK, as they're quite familiar with paying for what museums call a box charge for the deposition of physical archives. And as we're not actually a national body, that means our collecting remit is actually international. Although most of our archives are from the UK, we do collect data from UK academics or UK organisations that work outside of the UK and where there is no other suitable digital repository. The aim of the ADS has always been to support research, learning and teaching with freely available, high quality and dependable digital resources by preserving and disseminating that data in the long term. And we disseminate our data open access via our website. And we currently have 1.4 million metadata records, primarily of UK archaeology. So that's usually event records saying a particular activity has happened in a particular place. We also host over 65,000 reports, or you might know them as grey literature, again, primarily on UK archaeology. We then also have over 45,000 open access articles and monographs, which can be from archaeology around the world. And over 2,000 data-rich project archives. Again, these can be international as well. And a project archive can be as little as a couple of spreadsheets, or it could be for a large infrastructure project with hundreds of thousands of files. So overall, the archive that the ADS hosts equates to about 25 terabytes of data, made up of about 3.6 million files and over 308 unique formats within that. As I said, everything's available via our website, and on average we have about 700,000 visitors a year, so we do get used quite a lot. But of course, the core activity of the ADS is the long-term digital preservation of data entrusted to our care. And we do this by following the OAIS model. We carry out preservation by data migration to ensure the integrity, reliability and accessibility of our data. And we do it through a totally bespoke system, so we don't use any proprietary or open source preservation systems or software that you might be familiar with. And I realised I should have put a link on that slide, and I'll add it before I share it with you guys later. But you can find out tons about our preservation policies on our website. We've got policies for everything, and they're all open access and available. So you can find out more about that if you wish. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the ADS is not a national repository, unlike what you might be familiar with. And in the UK, the digital archiving landscape is rather complex, and that's due to the already highly fragmented nature of archaeology in the UK in general. Primarily, archaeology is carried out by commercial archaeological contractors as part of a process of development and planning control. But we do have about 30 universities across the UK that teach archaeology, and many of them also undertake archaeological research in the UK. And in addition, there's always been a very active independent sector made up of local archaeological societies and community groups, which also carry out archaeology, and very good archaeology as well. In terms of the archaeological legislation and guidelines, the UK is made up of 4 countries, obviously, plus the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands. And all of those have their own national bodies, their own policies, practices, regulations, all of which unfortunately differ. And it's not always the same organisation in one country that sets the legislation or the policy, which then writes the guidelines that the archaeological practitioners are expected to follow, which then eventually looks after the archaeological archive itself. I did consider giving a full rundown of who was responsible for what and where, but realised it would take way too long and I'd probably confuse even myself. But in relation to the digital archiving, it's enough to know that in Scotland and Wales, the national bodies there, Historic Environment Scotland and the Royal Commission of Ancient and Historical Monuments Wales, it's a bit of a tongue twister, have always set out to provide a comprehensive national record, and as such, they are seeking to develop their own digital archiving capabilities on a national level. And in fact, Historic Environment Scotland has just received Core Trust Seal of Accreditation. So the UK now has 2 accredited repositories for archaeological data, the ADS and Historic Environment Scotland. In Northern Ireland, it is slightly different again, with archaeology being directly controlled by the state, and archaeologists in Northern Ireland have to be licensed. And although there's no actual digital archiving provision at the moment, so there's no digital archive for Northern Ireland currently, there is a requirement for archaeologists to prepare a digital archive. So hopefully that will definitely come soon. In England, however, there is no legal requirement to deposit physical or digital archaeological archives. There is no licensing of archaeological practitioners. There is no statutory requirement for the existence of archaeological repositories themselves. So established practice in England rests upon planning policy guidance, and the implementation of that guidance depends upon local government archaeology officers. Prior to this presentation, I actually looked up how many planning authorities there are in England, and there's 445 of them, which is a lot. Luckily, they don't all work independently, but they are definitely at least over 100 member organisations listed on the Association for Local Government Archaeology Officers. So there's an awful lot of different policies out there. And unfortunately, a lot of those local authorities simply ask for the archaeological archive in its entirety to be deposited with a local museum, with no special provision for digital data at all. So a study undertook by the ALGAO, or the Association for Local Government Archaeology Officers, found that only 1% of archaeological projects in England between 2013 and 2018 produced a digital archive that was actually deposited in a repository. And of course, not all of those projects might have necessarily created digital data. It's certainly definite that there was more than only 1% creating digital data that should have been deposited somewhere. So there's a huge gap in what has been created and what has actually been adequately preserved. The lack of a national repository in England and the reliance on local and regional policies has kind of meant that the ADS has essentially become the de facto digital archive for archaeological research in England. And we are now the official recommended repository for many local authorities and museums and Historic England, the national body. This position was strengthened in 2018 when Historic England made a series of recommendations to the government, including one that stated museums should not attempt to curate digital archive material. It should be deposited in a trusted digital repository such as the ADS. And to support this recommendation, Historic England recognised that there was a need to provide clear guidance for archaeological practitioners that would work alongside industry standards and that would be then supported by archaeological planning officers. So they commissioned a project to create a sectoral standard and guidance for managing digital data. And this is the project that we know as Think Archive Work Digital. The project was run by a company called Dig Ventures and the Chartered Institute for Archaeology, which is the professional body for archaeologists in the UK, which sets standards and guidelines which archaeologists and practitioners should follow. And it was managed by a woman called Dr. Manda Foster. The project aimed to gain an understanding of how digital data was currently used and managed by the sector, and then signpost the sector to existing resources, of which there was a lot out there, just weren't necessarily being used, and eventually provide a step-by-step guidance for practitioners at all stages of the archaeological project. The project was structured into 3 areas. The first was an information gathering exercise to understand the current situation in the UK. This included a survey, and I think there was 185 respondents from a mix of backgrounds, from archaeologists working in commercial units to planning officers to museum curators. And it confirmed what we already knew, really, in that the sector had very little confidence in their digital skills. There was very low implementation of any practical tools that were already available to help them, such as the use of data management plans, for example. And there was a real lack of understanding as to what digital archiving actually was, despite the fact that ADS has been around for over 25 years and we've worked very hard to improve knowledge. The table that you can see on the screen summarises an answer to a question. In your experience, to what extent was digital data actively managed during project delivery in the various ways? And there's some quite interesting and rather contradictory stats within that table. You can probably see that one of the ones at the bottom is says archived, and there was over 60 respondents saying that all projects were archived. The digital data from all projects were archived. But when you look a little bit further up, there's only actually 17 respondents creating metadata for all projects. So that makes you question what those digital archives are actually containing. And what it reveals is the sector is still really considering depositing a CD alongside the physical archive within a museum as archiving digital material. The second part of the Think Archive Work Digital, I've forgotten which way around it is now, was a review of the CIFA standards and guidance. And this found out that while the standards were applicable to digital data, they were not being necessarily implemented in relation to digital outputs. So the project made several recommendations of minor changes to the standards and guidelines, which have already been begun to be implemented. And these included, I'm not going to read them all out, but the ones to point out really are that one was that project planning documentation required by planning officers across England should use a data management plan, or should include a data management plan. The repository for a digital archive must be a digital repository. Previously, the guidelines had just said that it should be an accredited repository, which could, of course, be an accredited museum. So now it's very specifically stating it should be a digital repository. And the final version of the data management plan should also be included within the archaeological archive deposited. And then the final part of the project was to carry out, was the creation of guidance. This includes lots of written guidance, which you can download from the project website. There's a report on the project itself, as well as all the guidance it has created that's available in documentary form. But there's also a web page and resources available via the CIFA website, which is called the Dig Digital Toolkit. And the toolkit itself is broken up into 3 areas. The toolbox itself contains 5 tools, and although originally designed for UK archaeologists, I believe it would be able to be applied to any kind of archaeological organisation, no matter where they're working. The digital health check is one of the first tools, and the idea of this is that you can work through a series of questions which reveals aspects of your data management within your own organisation or your individual working practices, and then it tells you basically where you are at within data management. And then if you have areas that need improving, you can then use the action plan to map out the changes you might need to make, including any training needs you might need, or organisational structures or workflows that might need altering. The second tool, and possibly the biggest tool in the toolbox, is a detailed data management plan checklist, and you can an editable template which you can download. The template itself sets out all the key kind of traditional sections of a data management plan, as you can see on the screen there. But then it goes further and it breaks those sections down into more detailed areas. And within those more detailed areas, it gives a set of questions to consider that are specifically relevant to archaeology. Within the checklist, it then provides guidelines and links to additional documentation that can help an archaeological practitioner answer those questions. And then eventually it also then gives examples of how the sections can be filled out. And it's specifically for commercial archaeological work. So it's quite unique in that respect, as many data management templates that you do tend to come across are often focused on academic research. So it's a particularly useful tool for archaeologists in the UK and would be applicable elsewhere. There are also 3 more tools that will be added to the toolbox in the coming months, which are based around workflows. There will also be a series of flashcards, which will be a bit like frequently asked questions or issues, and a set of case studies, which I think are probably going to be one of the most useful areas for archaeologists, because they will then show how data management can happen in practice within various different areas of archaeology. And I think, I'm not sure whether I've rushed through that or took too long. But to just really summarise, please do have a look at the Dig Digital Toolkit and have a look at the resources that are available there. The project is, of course, just one of many activities that are currently in progress or have recently been conducted in the UK to improve digital data management and archiving of archaeological archives. It's an ongoing process, definitely. Hopefully it won't take another 25 years to get it all nicely sorted out. But I am actually quite happy to report that just in the last year, we've already started to see an improvement in deposition. We are getting more digital archives deposited every year, but not only are we getting more archives, the quality of the archives are improving, with more digital data being deposited of different types. So in the past, we often got lots of reports and photographs. We're now actually starting to see the kind of data that sits behind those reports as well. And actually, the data management plans are being deposited with us as well. So that means they are actually being created and hopefully being followed. So it's, as I said, an ongoing process, but hopefully one that will improve in the years to come.
Brilliant. Thank you, Katie. And you kept time splendidly.